started the Iran war now made J.D. Vance to try and put some distance between him and the Trump administration. Because according to some reports, J.D. Vance may not run for the presidency in 2028 and could postpone his presidential bid to 2032. And in Italy, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's coalition has won the Venice mayoral election. But let's of course start with this big story that's in fact coming from the United States of America. And the question is obviously this: is J.D. Vance likely to delay his presidential run? Now, the American vice president could be planning to aim for the top job not immediately after Trump's presidency, but once Donald Trump's second term ends. But according to reports, it's being said that he could consider postponing his presidential bid to 2032 or even 2036 to put some distance between him and the Trump administration. A report in Britain's Daily Mail has said that J.D. Vance is seeing his influence waning within the Trump administration. The Iran war has seen the so-called the President of Peace, Donald Trump, embrace his role as the commander-in-chief of the world's most powerful military. The Trump's abduction of the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and now his war on Iran have seen him championing American military interventionism. And this has in fact gone against the non-interventionist rhetoric that J.D. Vance and his faction in the administration had constantly touted. Now, Trump himself has acknowledged his differences with J.D. Vance on this matter. The reports say that J.D. Vance is increasingly isolated in the U.S. administration, especially with the recent exit of the other dovish members such as Tulsi Gabbard. Now, remember, last week Tulsi Gabbard had resigned, citing her husband being diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer as being the reason. The outgoing U.S. Director of National Intelligence was seen as part of a non-interventionist faction and J.D. Vance's ally within the administration. Another dove was Joe Kent, the former director of the U.S. National Counter-Terrorism Center. He quit in protest of the war on Iran. The reports say that Joe Kent was another key ally of J.D. Vance. The dwindling anti-interventionist faction means that J.D. Vance's ability to influence U.S. policy is dwindling. And therefore, if he chooses to run for presidency in 2028, he'll carry the baggage of the Trump administration's actions, even if he was opposed to them. And that baggage already seems to be weighing him down. Recent polls by Ipsos and the Public Sentiment Institute show that Americans consider J.D. Vance unfavorably now. His ratings have been taking a beating since the Iran war began, and combine this with the fact that most politicians lose their approval ratings over the course of their tenure. This means that J.D. Vance will likely start with a massive disadvantage if he decides to run for the top job in 2028. However, running later may be even worse for Vance. In 2032, he'd be running against an incumbent, and only Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush and Donald Trump have lost re-election bids over the last 50 years. And 2036 or later than that means that J.D. Vance will risk having been away from the public spotlight for way too long. While J.D. Vance finds himself between a rock and a hard place, another face in the Trump administration could be seeing their star on the rise. And that, of course, is the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Now, Rubio is considered a hawk. He is reportedly planning a possible invasion of Cuba. And reports say that Trump is listening to the Secretary of State more and more as he's embracing his pro-interventionism persona. And according to recent polls, Rubio is also viewed unfavorably by the American public, but less so than Vance, and that of course puts him at a bit of an advantage when it comes to any Republican Party primary in 2028. There's still more than 2 years to go for the next US presidential election, and Vance's fortunes could of course change in that time, and so could Rubio's. But as things stand, it seems that with Trump's U-turn on his promise of peace, the hawkish Rubio appears to be gaining an advantage over the dovish Vance ahead of the next American race to power. All right, now WION's correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us from New York. Susan, this is a pretty interesting sort of a report that is coming in that probably J.D. Vance is losing his influence because he sees some of the other dovish members of the cabinet stepping away. In your assessment, what's your reading of all of this? Will J.D. Vance delay his presidential bid from 2028? And is Marco Rubio gaining an advantage over J.D. Vance?
Yeah, Mohammed, as you mentioned, all of this is speculation by newspapers and the news media, and it's somewhat started by the president himself when he, a few days ago in the Rose Garden, sort of asked attendants, do you prefer a Rubio ticket or do you prefer a Vance ticket? Do you prefer a Rubio-Vance ticket or a Vance-Rubio ticket? And people were clapping in response, and he said, of course, I'm not going to give an endorsement. The reason that caused speculation is because he didn't outright endorse his own vice president. But you have to remember that Vance is very young. He's in his early 40s. He's 41 years old, compared to Rubio, who has a lot of experience, not only as the Secretary of State now and NSA director, but also he is pretty favored on Capitol Hill, especially during the time that he was a senator. So it's natural that perhaps the next official or the next candidate would be Rubio, but it's all so soon to tell, and it's hard to imagine that, you know, it's true that Vance is being sidelined as of now, and it's hard to imagine that Vance is being considered a dove as well. You know, he has pretty strong opinions as well, and he's pretty popular among the MAGA force. So, you know, let's see what happens, but these are all fun speculations. They're interesting speculations, but nothing is set in stone, and we have a lot of time.
Indeed, and we have to look at the midterms before we think of a presidential bid by any of these contenders. Thank you very much indeed, Susan, for joining us with those updates there. All right, let's now get you some updates from the state of Tamil Nadu in India, where with every passing day, there are internal troubles that continue to mount for the AIADMK, which now is the third largest party within the Tamil Nadu Assembly. The party that has been witnessing an internal rift since the Assembly floor test on the 13th of May. In the last 24 hours, a total of 4 AIADMK MLAs have in fact tendered their resignation. It all began on Monday when 3 MLAs of the AIADMK chose to step down from the elected office. The MLAs had met the Assembly Speaker and tendered their resignation shortly after tendering their own resignation. The trio in fact met with Tamil Nadu's Sports Minister, Adhav Arjuna. Now, Adhav is a close aide of the TVK Chief and Chief Minister Vijay. Now, during the meeting, the trio formally joined the TVK, that is Tamil Nadu's ruling party, and this move attracted allegations of horse trading. Now, this morning, another AIADMK MLA tendered his resignation to the Assembly Speaker, and with these resignations, the strength of the AIADMK legislators within the Assembly has gone from 47 to 43. And after actor-turned-politician Vijay's party swept the polls and then pushed AIADMK to the third position, the AIADMK legislators have been worried about the party's future and their own. The resignations of MLAs and internal developments have in fact led to further realignments between the camps of the AIADMK. Now, the party has also approached the Tamil Nadu Assembly Speaker to withdraw the acceptance of the resignation of the 3 MLAs. A faction representing the AIADMK chief, Palanisamy, met the Assembly Speaker and referred to the pending disqualification proceedings. Bolivia appears to be sliding deeper into political turmoil, and now the crisis is spilling onto the streets. Violent clashes erupted in the capital La Paz as the protesters battled the police for the 4th straight week of nationwide unrest. From labor unions and miners to transport workers and rural groups, thousands have taken to the streets, demanding President Rodrigo Paz to step down. They've accused his government of pushing harsh austerity measures while the cost of living continues to soar. The roadblocks were put up across the country, but they've triggered a major supply crisis. Food, fuel, medicine shortages have been hitting La Paz pretty hard. with long queues forming outside the markets, hospitals and gas stations. And under mounting pressure, President Rodrigo Paz has now announced a pretty dramatic symbolic move, cutting his own salary and the salary of his cabinet ministers by half in order to try and appease the people. Paz has said that the decision shows his government's commitment to the country as Bolivia is facing an economic collapse.
Quiero avisarles que este presidente junto a sus ministros
I want to inform you that this president, together with his ministers, has taken the decision as part of the effort and commitment to the country to lower his salary by 50% so that it contributes to a clear effort that Bolivia has a president and ministers who will join that effort. 50% of our salary will be reduced.
50% de nuestro salario será rebajado.
But the protesters on the streets remain unconvinced. Tensions are also escalating in Bolivia's Chipar region, the political stronghold of former President Evo Morales. Now, cocoa growers arrived in motorcycle convoy and surrounded a military base, warning the armed forces not to move against the protesting civilians. Now, the government has accused the supporters of Evo Morales of fueling the unrest and paying the protesters to keep the blockades going, a claim that risks pushing Bolivia's political divide even deeper. Now, Rodrigo Paz, who took office just months ago in November, says that the spending cuts and fuel subsidy reductions are necessary to stabilize an economy that is already in a bit of a crisis. But with protests intensifying, supplies are running low and public anger growing, Bolivia could of course be headed towards its most dangerous political showdown in many years. Now, in a key win for the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's government, the right-wing coalition has won the Venice mayoral election. Projections show the right-wing alliance had retained control of the most prominent city, at stake in a round of local votes held across Italy. The polling, in fact, took place in more than 600 towns and cities in the first electoral test for the government since a major loss in a justice referendum in March. Now, this was a major setback for Giorgia Meloni that had marked her most significant reversal since taking charge in 2022. The latest projections showed that the centre-right candidate Simone Venturini had won nearly 51% of the vote, ahead of his main opponent's 39%, thus avoiding a runoff required when no candidate secures more than 50%. With the lead so large to close, polling agencies have officially projected Venturini as the winner of the Venice mayoral election. Now, Venice has been ruled by the right for a decade, even as it has faced some intense backlash recently over Russia's presence at the biennial art festival. While early opinion polls this month predicted a major shift towards the centre-left, the right-wing coalition has managed to completely defy expectations and also to hold the city. In Salerno, the centre-left heavyweight Vincenzo De Luca won a fifth mayoral term. Meanwhile, the independent Federico Basil held on to the mayor's seat in Messina. The biggest shift came in Reggio Calabria, where the centre-right successfully flipped a leftist stronghold that was held since 2014. And these local votes were amongst the last ones before next year's general election, and Italy's two main political groups are now running neck and neck before the big 2027 race. A Russian Orthodox cleric has been detained in the Czech Republic after police discovered containers of a suspicious white substance in his car. And the arrest has now sparked diplomatic tensions between Prague and Moscow, with Russia calling the arrest a political provocation. The Czech authorities say that they actually stopped a man on Sunday evening on a highway between Prague and the western spa town of Karlovy Vary. And the officers say that 4 containers holding a white substance were found in the trunk of the vehicle, and the investigators have not yet confirmed the nature of the material and no formal charges have been filed. The individual was later identified as Bishop Hilarion, once one of the most influential figures in Russian Orthodox Church, also known as Gregory Alfiev. He categorically denied any involvement in drug trafficking and now serves in Karlovy Vary. A Czech spa town known for its large Russian-speaking community, the Czech officials say that the operation followed an anonymous tip-off alleging the transport of narcotic and psychotropic substances. The Hilarian's legal team claims that the bishop was not allowed to observe the search of his vehicle and is demanding for independent forensic testing along with fingerprint and DNA analysis. Now, Russia's foreign ministry has sharply criticized the detention. Spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has called the incident an orchestrated provocation and has demanded for Hilarian's immediate release. Now, Russia has also summoned the Czech diplomatic mission for a formal protest. Now, Bishop Hilarion once led the Russian Orthodox Church's Foreign Relations Department for about 13 years and was widely viewed as a possible successor to Patriarch Kirill, a close ally of the Russian President Vladimir Putin. He was unexpectedly sent abroad in 2022 following the reported disagreements within the church leadership after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Senegal's political power struggle has taken a very dramatic new turn. Just days after being fired as Prime Minister, firebrand politician Ousmane Sonko has now been elected as the Speaker of the National Assembly, consolidating his hold over Senegal's parliament. And adding to the shake-up, President Bassirou Diomaye Faye has appointed economist Ahmadou Al-Aminou Mohamed as the new Prime Minister. The new Prime Minister has been tasked with steering the country out of its economic crisis.
En ces moments cruciaux de la nation,
in these crucial moments in the life of the nation, we must all be aware of the emergency context in which our country finds itself, particularly the situation of public finances and its impact on the economy, the immediate effects of the Middle East crisis on energy prices, and its delayed but evident impact on many products.
Now, Sonko's appointment as the parliamentary speaker comes after Faye removed him from the Prime Minister's job, marking a pretty sharp falling out between the two former allies who swept to power together last year. Now, the opposition boycotted the vote, calling Sonko's return to the parliament to be illegal, accusing the ruling majority of staging what he described as an institutional coup. But with Sonko's Pastef party controlling a massive majority in the assembly, his election was all but guaranteed. In his very first speech as the speaker, Sonko attempted to strike a much calmer tone, saying that he would not use the position to create institutional chaos or to target President Faye. At the same time, he also made it clear that Senegal's parliament will not be a rubber stamp body. Now, the growing rift between Faye and Sonko threatens to paralyze Senegal's reform agenda at a time when the country is struggling with a debt crisis and the rising economic pressures. The Nepalese Supreme Court has quashed the arrest warrant issued against the former Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Dioba and his wife. The couple have been accused of money laundering and illegally accumulating wealth. In its order, Nepal's top court said that the arrest warrant has become automatically inactive. The Supreme Court noted that the legal procedure had not been properly followed while issuing the warrant. And the warrant had been issued by the Kathmandu District Court back in April, and the Supreme Court said that the Department of Money Laundering investigation and the Kathmandu District Court had failed to establish the legal grounds necessary for issuing an arrest warrant. Under Nepal's anti-money laundering law, an arrest can only be made if there are reasonable grounds to believe that an accused person flees, destroys evidence, or obstructs the investigation or influences the case. The Supreme Court's order has said that such grounds have not been adequately demonstrated. Now, the arrest warrant against the Diobas was issued after the formation of Balendra Shah's government. However, the couple had reportedly fled to Singapore just a week before the parliamentary elections. Reports further suggest that the couple later moved to Hong Kong. However, their whereabouts could not be independently verified. And our correspondent Saloni Murarka has been tracking the story very closely for us and has sent us this report from Kathmandu. Listen in.
Nepal Supreme Court has ordered that former Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deoba and his wife Arzu Rana Deoba cannot be arrested for now in money laundering investigation. What this means is that 2 arrest warrants were issued against the couple by the Kathmandu District Court, which now stands invalid as court argues that only the special court can handle cases being investigated by the money laundering department. This is a part of the ongoing money laundering investigation against the couple. The authorities in Nepal had even sought Interpol support to arrest Deobas after they left for Singapore following the change in the government. But with this interim order, the Supreme Court has provided some relief to Deobas and has even ordered that proper legal procedure must be carried out to investigate. For the future of the case, this does not end the investigation, but authorities argue that it does weaken the immediate legal push against Deobas, as now the case will go through special court instead. I'm Saloni Murarka, reporting for WION from Kathmandu, Nepal.
Peter Murrell, once a powerful figure in British politics, now faces a long prison sentence. Murrell has pleaded guilty for embezzling more than £400,000, which is equivalent to about $540,000 from the Scottish National Party. Peter Murrell is in fact the ex-husband of the former First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, who quit as the SNP leader and the First Minister in February in 2023. In April 2023, Murrell was arrested after officers searched the home he shared with his then-wife Sturgeon near Glasgow as part of an investigation into the SNP's finances. Murrell was Scottish National Party's chief executive from 2001 till 2023. Murrell, who was remanded into custody in the High Court in Edinburgh after his plea admitted using party funds to buy a high-priced motorhome, 2 cars including a Jaguar, and luxury goods including Bremont watches and household items that included 2 toilet seats. A once prominent figure in the SNP, Murrell's arrest has sent shockwaves through Scotland's ruling party. Scotland's current First Minister John Swinney, who was re-elected to his post following SNP's victory in local elections in May, said that he felt betrayed by Murrell's actions, and Scotland's former First Minister Sturgeon, who was also arrested in 2023 over claims of mismanagement of SNP's finances. However, she was cleared in the probe in 2025. In 2025, she also announced that Murrell and she have separated. Sturgeon stepped down as a lawmaker early this year, ending nearly 30-year career as one of independence movement's main figureheads.
And that's a position that I can see have chosen to stand up. Reputation and the integrity of Scotland. That the evidence I shall give.
That is, of course,
the answer I gave you a moment ago.
And without its wrap on this edition of Race to Power, this is Mohammed Saleh signing off. Thanks for watching.
Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is one.
WION asks what matters, the question the world wanted answered.